All right, welcome back, everyone, or welcome if you've just joined us. I see we have a few more people in the room. We're going to go ahead and get started with the second, little more than half of this session of presentation. I'm going to toss things over to Karen for our next introduction.
Thanks, Jessica. Our next presentation is titled Custom Reports, the Power Tools for Excavating Archive Space Data from Marie Lyons. They are the Special Collections and Archives Implementation Consultant at Atlas Systems, which is a registered service provider of archive space. She's been with Atlas for 16 years and works with Special Collections and Archives customers on their ArchivesSpace and Aeon implementations. Prior to working at Atlas, she was a digital initiatives consultant for Special Collections and Archives in Colorado, a cataloger at the National Security Archive in Washington, D.C., and a part-time librarian in the NPR Library. Please welcome Marie Lyons.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation on custom reports, which I am calling the power tools for excavating archive space data. I'm going to start with a very brief overview of things like standard reports and the download CSV button that's available in the staff interface. It will help to see exactly why custom reports are power tools, but we're going to spend the bulk of the time on custom reports. I'll talk a little bit about setting them up, and then I'm going to spend most of the time on giving you examples of custom reports that you can set up for different archival functions. While I'm doing that, I will also provide tips for managing custom reports over time. This presentation is only focusing on what's available in the staff user interface. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start briefly with standard reports and download CSV and then move into custom reports. There are other options for reporting external to the staff user interface. They're very powerful options. Things like using the ArchivesSpace API, querying the database directly, whether it's through SQL scripts or using an open database connectivity link or plugins. So that is not within the scope of this presentation. Some things to keep in mind, since we are focusing just on the staff user interface, if you have multiple repositories, whenever you run reports, whether they're standard reports or custom reports, they provide results from the selected repository. So you would need to switch over to different repositories to get those results. The other thing that you'll probably notice along the way, and might be a little disappointing, is that we cannot collect usage statistics, particularly with what our patrons and researchers are engaging with on the public user interface side. And I am using version 4.1.1 for this presentation. So at this point, I'm going to leave my presentation, but everything that I'll be talking about is in the slides, which will be available to you. So I'm going to just move this over to my other window, and I'm going to go to my ArchivesSpace instance. And the first thing I'm going to start with is standard reports. And again, just a brief overview. So if you log into the staff user interface, again, you'll select whatever repository you want to work with. You'll click on the gear wheel next to the repository name and then go down to reports to see your library of standard reports. What's nice about these reports is that they come with the system. They're all built for you. As you can see, there are many different reports in here, a lot of accession reports, a couple of resource record reports. There's one in here, unprocessed accessions. I'm going to return to that in a minute. So this is a great starting point. Some of these reports meet our needs, but there are some limitations with these reports. First of all, most of these reports, well, that was one exception. Let me get back. Let me get to this one. Most do not have the ability to scope any sort of filters or values. The assessments is one exception there. So I have no choice but to run a report on all of the accessions in my database, even if I just wanted the ones that were created this year. Basically, all I can choose is the output format. I also can't choose which data comes down with those results. A second option for gathering data for reporting is using what's called the download CSV button. And the benefit of that, there's a couple of benefits, is first of all, I can form a list of search results using keyword searching, which is not something we can do in the reports, both standard and custom report. So for example, if I wanted to grab a list of every record type that had this person's name listed in it, this will give me a list of all my results. And then I can click on download CSV. This is going to give me a comma separated values list that I can then open up in Excel. And it could be I need to provide that to someone on staff. Another benefit of downloading something through CSV is it gives me the flexibility to sort on fields that I'm not able to through the staff interface. Another nice thing about that download CSV is if I restrict my results to a specific record type, I then can choose which columns export with my CSV results. I can do that by going up to my repository preferences, going to that particular record type, and then choosing which columns I want to see, and then exporting that info. So this is a little more flexible than standard reports. It really depends, of course, on what you're going to be searching on and browsing on. There are some limitations, though. I can only choose up to and including 7 columns, and some things do not export. Audit information is an example here. Also, any relationships to other records, like if I exported a list of archival objects, I would not be able to see the parent record that they belong to. So I'm going to bring my presentation back to get into custom reports. So many more benefits to using custom reports. We have so much more choice and more granular options. We can display which field, we can choose which fields display. We can even filter on certain fields. But more importantly, we can show relationships to other records and build pretty complex custom reports. We create templates for these reports, and once they're created, they're good to go. We can edit them at any point and run them. There are some limitations you'll see as I go through these. Not every field from every record type, and really not every record type, is available for creating custom reports on. And as I mentioned, we cannot do keyword searching. I'm going to return back to my system. So to get to, actually, let me bring that slide back. Something to be aware of, there is an initial key you'll have to set in the config file to enable custom reports. I believe it's set to false by default. So you'll need to find this in your config file. You'll remove the hashtag that's at the beginning and change false to true, and that will enable them. There are also some permissions that are needed for staff users that are going to be using them. So if a staff person is not a system administrator, with the permission group that they belong to, they're going to need these 2 permissions here. So I'm going to head over to my custom reports. I'm going to go to the gear wheel next to the repository name and go down to custom report templates. On a new system or on a system where you've not worked with custom report templates before, unlike the standard report library, this page will be empty. Nothing will be here until you start creating a custom report. And what you need to do is create the framework for it first before you can actually run the report results. To do that, I'm going to click on the Create Template button here. This is going to give me the form. And while I go through this form with you, I'm going to talk a little bit about some management recommendations. As you can see here, name is required. And if I return back to my list of custom report templates, I recommend that you might want to come up with some local naming conventions, because as you can see here, they only sort alphabetically, and that's about it. So if you do have multiple repositories, when you create a custom report, that is available to the other repositories. Again, when you run it, it's only using the data from the selected repository. But if you want to say, hey, this particular repository created this report, I would put that repo name or acronym, et cetera, in front. Another idea is if you create reports that are specifically for your annual reports or regular reporting needs, to label those a certain way so that they sort. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing is that there is a description field, which actually is not required. As you can see here on my system, some of these are so vague. I have no idea. What does this even mean? Who created it? When did they last run it? So I highly recommend that you make a local policy to use the optional description field. Write a detailed description and maybe also put your initials and the date that it was created. Because every so often you might want to go here and get rid of reports that aren't needed. Again, you have to kind of scroll all the way down this list. Limit, as you can see here, there's different denominations in here. We recommend you begin with 100 when you're first creating your framework. This is because reports, standard and custom, use a lot of system resources to run. And so when I'm first setting up a custom report, especially again, because we can link it to other records, I want to start with the smallest number. What this means is not that ArchivesSpace is going to go through the first 100 records in the index. It means it's going to keep going through records until it finds 100 records that meet your criteria. So we want to keep this the lowest as possible, test our framework, and then go back and run the report. If everything looks good, then I can come back and change this to whatever I think is appropriate in this moment. And then finally, record type. This is what I'm actually going to be running the report on. Depending what I choose here, all of the fields below that will dynamically change and be related to that record type. So I'm going to, just for sake of time, I'm going to open up a prepared report. And this is one of the custom report examples that I'm providing to you. So I'm going to go into edit mode. You can see here, I've given it a name, description. Again, I'm starting with 100 and I'm running this on accessions. Below that, it is offering me many fields, not all, but many fields from the accession record. In some places, I can choose to just display, or I could actually filter the report on different fields. For this, I chose date of accessioning. Further down, as you can see, there's all kinds of things here. I could limit things if you wanted to know whether or not restrictions were there. You could select that. I'm going to have a title display. I can also tailor my reports to just show the ones that were created by a certain staff person or who last updated them, or nothing to do with the staff person, but to show what was created during a certain time period, or both, or also show what was updated as well. Now, linked records. This is not a filtering section. This is where I'm saying, show me if whether or not what I'm trying to run a report on has any of these records that I've marked. Since I'm trying to find unprocessed accessions, I want to see whether or not resources are linked. That's going to be my indication that it's unprocessed. By the way, there is a standard report called unprocessed accessions. However, it solely hinges on the use of the processed event record. So if you do not use that event record, setting up this custom report is going to work well for you. And then finally, you can choose how to sort this. I like to do accession date. That could help prioritize my work because the oldest accessions might be the ones that I want to visit first, or vice versa, the newest ones might be the easiest to do. Once I create that template, I click on Save Template. And like I said, that's a one-time step and I'm good to go. I could always edit it at any time if I did do filtering on date ranges, like for my annual reports, I just go into edit and change whatever I want. For this, I'm going to go to Run. Again, I can choose what format I want to use. JSON gives you data that you can then put into a script. Like again, if you were working with the API, HTML and PDF are basically hard-coded data. They're kind of fun to work with to see what they look like. And then rich text format you could potentially use in other programs, etc. I typically use CSV because then I can open that file in Excel and I could potentially do other things in Excel, etc. So once I run that report, I let ArchivesSpace do its thing. Again, it could take a couple of minutes. It just depends on how much data I have. When I get the prompt to refresh, I'll then go ahead and download my report, save that locally, and then when I open this up, it's going to open up on my computer in Excel, which will give it a second to open up. Doesn't want to seem to open up. Let's see if it's on my other screen. Yeah, here we go. So I'm going to expand this a little bit, make it a little bit larger so you can see what came down. So here, once I'm in Excel, I could sort by any column again if I wanted to deal with the ones that were the oldest first, etc. But what's most important to me here is to sort by resource identifier or title and find out anything that is blank, because that's my indication that this has not been processed, or at the very least, I do not have a resource record for the succession in ArchivesSpace. Maybe it's in an older system. All right, so I am now going to talk about and show you examples of custom reports that you can do that fall within these different categories. And I'll read these categories out loud as I go through the examples. There is going to be, when I send in my slides, I am going to send in a companion PDF that you can use. It's this document here that provides you with the different configurations to set up your custom reports. So that's what I'm going to go through now. And again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to stay with this document, but just let me know if you have any questions. So our first category is nailing down priorities. One type of report you can run is to identify archival objects that do not have instances. The use case for this could be like for specifically, you might have, most archives, they use file and item level archival objects to connect to top container instances. So what I can do is create a custom report, filter my level of description to show me just file or items for the record type archival objects. I will then choose some fields to display so that I can easily look up if I need to get into those archival objects after I run the report. And then I'm going to be linking to instances. That presence of whether or not an instance is there is my indication of what's missing. And then I also want to link to resources because I just want to see the parent record displayed. What's nice about this report is that it's going to show you both top container instances and digital object instances. So if you're working on trying to get things rehoused and setting up boxes, the blank top container entries will be interesting to you. If you're working on a digitization project, you'll know which archival objects you have not linked to digital object records with yet. And that helps you prioritize your work. Another example that can help you prioritize is to find resource records with missing accession records. So that's important. We have no documentation of the legal transfer of custody and control of this collection. So I want to go through, run a report on my resources, link that to accessions, export to Excel, sort by that accession field what is blank. That means it's missing an accession record. I know what I have to go research now. I already talked about unprocessed accessions, and there's some gotcha notes, so I include these here with the reports that you'll be able to see when you look at this on your own. Another type of report you can run is resource records that don't have components. Now, some of those are legitimate. There's going to be collections that we only describe at the collection level. Occasionally, we might have like museum objects that we just describe at an item level, at that top level. But this could also help you find a backlog of resource records with large extents that it is likely that we need to continue processing this. We only got to that top level description. So again, there's some tips in here. This is typically a large report, so you might want to rerun it with different date ranges, again, just to help save your system resources. If you use the finding aid status field at that top collection level, you could exclude completed, which would be really helpful there. When I export this, I definitely want it to show me the extent info because then I can sort in Excel by that, and then also show me whether or not there are archival objects. Okay, next category, upgrading description records. So one example of report you can run is resource records if you use the rights statement subrecord, and that's also in accessions and digital objects as well. So any sort of description record. In this example, I have resources. You can run the report on that particular record type, link it to write statements, it's going to display the begin and end dates of those write statements. So if you have end dates that are now in the past, hey, that might be an opportunity that you might be able to publish something now or digitize something, or you've got to do other actions related to rights. Another use case that came up is the ability to print out the entire classification structure if that's something that your archive uses, and that includes the subterms. There were two use cases for this. One was to be able to print out the structure with the subterms, which are nested, so you can see sort of the relationships and the context of the subterms and how they fit into each other. The second use case, and this is really helpful if you use classifications as collecting groups, but even if you use them as record groups, you can also print out, have the report show you what description records the classifications are linked in. If it's something like a collecting area, you can kind of see where you may not have a lot of collections in that collecting area, and maybe that's a place to look to gather more. Next category, powering up other archival tasks. So assessment records in ArchivesSpace are really great. They're a way to survey your materials. And there's a field on there where you can flag that something in the assessment with the materials needs to be reviewed, and you can also mark who needs to review it. So this is a report that you can set up. The use case for this, one of the libraries I was working with, the digital archivist runs this report every 2 weeks, and she's looking for assessments where it's marked that digital material is with the collection, because her job is then to go review that digital material. Another one that came up is the archive with acquisitions that were given to them as gifts. They have a donor relations office that sends thank you notes to the individuals that donated, or corporate entities potentially that donate, or families that donated those gifts. So they run a report. This one is not very cut and dry. They have to kind of do a little bit of cross-referencing, but it saves having to copy and paste the contact info out of the agent records into a separate document. So I thought that was a nice use of a custom report. Next category, excavate hidden collections. Some of the ones we've talked about already will help with this. Another way to do that is to run a report on resource records, particularly published resource records, and find the ones that have no agents or subjects. That means they have no authority headings, number one, but also they don't have those valuable access points that helps promote discoverability. Again, this type of report you might want to break up. You can do separate ones on just agents and separate ones on just subjects. Another one is to find resource records that were never modified and not created this year, like created many years ago, and no one has gone back to them, or they haven't been modified in a very long time. That's a really good opportunity to go in and see what's going on with these. Did we finish them? Is there any revision statements that we can add, etc.? And now we get into one of the fun ones, extract statistics. So you can run reports, things to help you with your annual reports or whatever reports that you have to do. You can run reports on any available record type to show how many you created this year. So resource records, archival objects, accessions, digital objects, again, any of the record types that are there. You can also run other reports to show what you've modified during a time frame, which shows our labor. So those are just as valuable as creating the new reports. You can also limit reports to show what was published. Another thing that you can do is run a report on, going back to our assessment records, where assessments were completed during a certain time frame. They might have been started a couple of years ago, and now we finally got a chance to finish them. Another report you can run, this one's a little bit multi-step, but it is pretty cool, although it really depends also on how you describe. You could run a report on your resource records and link it to extents, and then open it in Excel. There's some little bit of data manipulation that you'll have to do. I put the steps here that should work for you, just to be able to separate out the extent number, because it's concatenated with type. Once you separate it out, you can have Excel run some totals for you on how much size or whatever the correct grammar is there, the extent of your collections. It does get messy if you have different extent types. You might want to pull out everything that's described by cubic feet versus digital extents, et cetera, or even physical item extents. But this could potentially be kind of cool and just get an idea of the physical size of your collections. And then finally, event records. If you use event records, you can run reports on those. One recent example I had was Archive created a custom event called exhibition use. And they run a report every year to pull anything that went on exhibit. And that's connected to both resources and archival objects so that you can see specifically what went on there. All right, again, you'll have that PDF document along with these slides. Those will all get updated. I talked about managing custom reports here. Annually, you might want to consider doing a weeding of your custom reports because as you saw, that gets pretty messy. And also something to be aware of, you can always go into your background jobs area. The same is true with standard reports as well, and rerun a report that you already ran and have the same results appear in case like you needed the results from a certain time period. If you're working with custom reports, please do submit ideas to JIRA if you come up to limitations. I already talked about some that are here. I'm going to be creating a ticket to see if we could allow for resources to link to notes. That's something that could be helpful if I need to make sure that I added our required notes everywhere. A couple of tickets have gone through already, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Again, using external staff reporting like the API is super powerful, but it's also nice to have these things, these functionalities directly available in the staff user interface. So these are some of the, or these are the clients that I worked with that I got some of these ideas for that I'm very thankful for. And that is my presentation. Please let me know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. That was great. It's fun to see like the possibilities with custom reports, and that was really positive. And I'm sure that people are excited for those resources you're going to share. We do already have 2 questions in the Q&A. If you have a question for Valerie, please, I'm looking at Valerie's comment in the chat. And okay, if you have a question for Anne-Marie or Valerie, put it in the Q&A and we will get to those really quickly. We started a little behind schedule, so we do have a few extra minutes that we can get to those questions.
Okay, I see the questions here. Can you change the name after you create a template? I'm pretty sure you can. Let me get back into my system. The only thing that I'm aware of is names do have to be yes, you can change it. They need to be unique. So within the repository itself. And then let me get back to.
Would you like for me to read the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Bree asks, my institution loves custom reports, but they tend to crash our server. Do you have any suggestions for avoiding a crash?
I really don't. For Atlas, what we do as a service provider is we will up server specs. So if you have a service provider, you could check with them to see if that's something they can do for you, or if you're on your local database. That's really all I can think of. Outside of just setting this to the lowest number, which is 100. But again, it could still be going through a lot.
Yeah. That's good advice, allocating more resources on the server for ArchivesSpace. But if that's not a possibility, one thing you could do is look at your reports and see if they're pulling a lot of linked records that you maybe don't need. Like if there are areas within the report where you're getting extra data that could help simplify it by getting rid of those. So yeah, the linked record specifically, that I know that can cause it to crash. So only ask for it to pull as many as you need, and don't link records if you don't need to. That's other advice that I give. If a customer report does not find any records that match the query, what does the background job result look like? Like a failed job?
No, it's not failed. It'll say completed, and when you download it, it'll be empty. So it'll have the header sort of metadata info about the report itself. It'll have the column headings, but it just won't, there'll be no data there.
Thanks. Elizabeth asks, curious what sorts of things cannot be done in custom reports and would need to be done in the API, thinking of where the community could advocate for improvements to custom reports.
So I might also need to call on my colleague Valerie, who's here. She has a lot more experience with the API. My understanding with the API is one of the things is I believe you can search across repositories and pull your reports across repositories, which is really nice. I'm also wondering with the API is if you could do keyword searching, incorporate keywords with your reports. But I'm not totally sure about that.
Yeah,
My
Valerie,
goal is to learn more about the PUI this year.
yeah, Valerie, please feel free to drop anything in the chat that you'd like. Another, and this isn't necessarily about the API, but I know that some organizations use things like external reporting software like Crystal Reports, because custom reports is really powerful, but because it is sort of specific to one record type, it depending on your institutional need, like if every year for your annual report, you have to give some sort of accounting across multiple record types or something, it may be better to use a software that allows you to customize the report that you're generating a little bit more than you can already do in custom reports in ArchivesSpace. So I would throw that one out to the community as well. It's also a great question for the listserv because I've seen some like really powerful stuff with things like crystal reports, and you can go even deeper into your ArchivesSpace data with those. And Valerie did drop some stuff in the chat. Yes, you could combine a keyword search and a multiple repo search in a script hitting the API. It would be a multiple setup, but a single script could handle all steps. So yeah, the API could handle something like that.
I just want to echo what Jessica said. Going back to that ODBC on one of my slides, that's open database connectivity, not just Crystal reports. What this is setting up a read-only account directly to the database. You can then export the data into Crystal reports. You can export it into Microsoft Excel or Access or Tableau, anything that could handle SQL data. So if you have expertise in setting up reports in a separate system like that, all you need is to pull in the data from ArchivesSpace and have it set in there. I will say that's not for the beginner. The ArchivesSpace database is very complex, takes a little bit of learning, but it can work really well, especially if you're comfortable with creating reports in general.
Yeah, for sure. Even though we're saying there are limitations to custom reports, it's still a really powerful tool. And I think for many users, even if it doesn't get you exactly what you need out, it gives you enough to massage the data somewhere else. So yeah, getting into a more complex system may not be what you need, but play around with custom reports. They're cool. We are a little past time, but there's one more question. I still feel like Sarit's asking about her move, even though it's completed. But Sarit asks, any recommendations for pulling top container data across a repository, not just a resource?
Um, I'm wondering, my initial thought is if that might be something through the API, and then
Yeah.
also it depends like what do you need exactly? Because there is a standard report already. I'd kind of have to dig into that question. Let me research that a little more, and then I can add an addendum to the PDF file before I send it in to have it posted.
Thanks, Emery. Uh, Anna makes an interesting comment in the chat about using the bulk updater functionality as a way to extract data about an entire collection. And even though that's more for like data cleanup, it's another way that you could get a bunch of information about one single collection out for reporting purposes and manipulation purposes. So that's a good point too.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
All right, we are past time though, so we'll go ahead and stop, and we're caught up on the Q&A. But thank you so much, Emery. That was great. I'm looking forward to seeing your resources, and I'm excited to see what people do with their custom reports. So thank you so much for that. Always informative. We're going to go ahead and move